Hello, in this section, I am going to just cover the basics of a Kubernetes cluster when it is set up by yourself or on-prem versus it is EKS cluster, which is basically a managed service provided to you by AWS. Similarly, there's GKS by Google Cloud, and there's also by Azure. So and comparatively, there are other products like Rancher, and there is Mirantis, and there are many other like vendors that provide um, Kubernetes clusters. They can be set up on-prem versus on cloud and on-prem both. But with the biggest difference, and like the one that I set up, it's a simple example. I set it up with just one manager and two workers, and I used kubadm init command to set it up. But similarly, these products are using internally all those commands. But what is the difference and what benefits do we get if I start using AWS EKS cluster versus the one, my own? Because my cluster is also running in the cloud. It's running in AWS, as I showed earlier in the videos. And I have three EC2 instances, and they're all running, and I have installed right software in it and everything. So the big difference is if you do it yourself, or even if you use another vendor, and you set it up either on the cloud or on prem, the control plane, which is usually more than one master, just to make the cluster highly available. So let's say we have three managers. Manager master, it can be used interchangeably. It should be actually manager. So the manager has a control plane which which has all the information about the cluster. The ATCD database is live within these nodes, and the but if you have your if you use another vendor, if you or you set it up yourself, and anywhere, you still are responsible for the maintenance of the nodes. For example, patching on the nodes, and keeping it up to date, and also making sure the nodes are up all the time, setting up proper alerts, monitors. And if one of your manager goes down, you need to make sure that you have some kind of algorithm or some kind of a script that brings up another manager, because if two of them are running, then you can and one of them is unhealthy, it can cause issues such as split brain, where both of them will try to become leaders, and it could cause issues. So there are a lot of things that go, and it requires a lot of extra resources and extra work in maintaining that. So as if comparatively, if you use EKS, which is a managed service provided, it's called Elastic Kubernetes Service provided by AWS, Amazon. And what it does is it gives, when we set up our EKS cluster, and I'll show you in the following video, that when we set up an EKS cluster, it automatically creates the management plane for us, and it doesn't ask you, do you want one manager or two manager or three. It decides on itself, and that's internal to uh, AWS EKS. So, we don't even get to log into the manager nodes. We don't get to see what's running on it, because it's totally their responsibility, and they provide us with the management plane. So the advantage is that it's definitely highly available, all because even if one of your manager goes down, it's AWS responsibility that they will bring up a similar manager for us, and then we will not be in the situation of maintaining or uh, promoting a worker to a manager or stuff like that. Similarly, patching is something that we don't have to worry about. Everything is managed by AWS. So the difference also is in the worker nodes. So the worker nodes, the only thing what you do when you set up a EKS cluster is the first step is to set up the cluster, which is actually setting up the control plane. And after that, you can add worker nodes to it, because worker nodes are the one where your pods, your workloads will be running. But the workloads are kind of, you should consider them as cattle, right? Like what they come and they go. It should the cluster remains healthy because the management plane is up in it, and you can so these can be EC2 instances. It can be set up in there are node groups. You can set up node groups within one availability zone, multiple availability zone, to make sure that you have enough coverage. and you can also set them in private network so that it doesn't have any access from outside. And ideally, you should never be logging in to any of the worker nodes, and management nodes is anyway not allowed, because the only way to access the cluster is using the kubectl command, which is from outside the cluster, so which could be running in another like a bastion host, or where you can log in, like in a public subnet, and then you can access the cluster, and you will use the kube config file, which will have the details, and then that's the right way to access any cluster without going in on any of the nodes, no SSH. And all the worker nodes should be set up so that they can be based on the load, they can be scaled up based on their worker groups, and their workloads can run on it. So in the next section, in the coming video, I'm going to show set up a EKS cluster, and then we're going to explore